Welcome to Champion Your Culture, the podcast, a weekly live show where we explore the power of culture and leadership in business. I'm Ryan McCarty.
And I'm George Rogers, and we go live every week to learn from each other and hear from other experts about how to effectively champion our team members and ourselves. So join us live every Wednesday on our social networks or subscribe. You can listen to Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Now, let's champion your culture.
What's up? It's a happy Wednesday, George. Where are you? Where are you at?
I'm in the cloudy state of Florida. Coming to you live here this morning in Florida. So I'm not sure what you're going to see behind me. I just want to forewarn you, I may not have HR-approved backgrounds, but we're going to have a lot of fun with this. And it's good to be here this morning with you, my friend.
Yes.
As we travel the world.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're like on a different location, and that's all wonderful. Well, hopefully you're going to get some sun over the next couple of days, man. It's not going to be cloudy the whole week, is it?
Oh, no. We've had actually perfect weather, and today's the first gloomy day. So we're good, man. We're good.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, that'll be great to have different people stop in and maybe say hi along the podcast. Yeah. We're glad that everybody's joining us today on Champion Your Culture, the podcast. We're excited because every week we have the opportunity, George and I, to get with you and have this convo. I was thinking about this morning, George, just how great it is to know, we meet people all the time throughout the week. They're like, hey, I listen to your podcast every week, or my family member listens to you and it helps them in their work and their culture and leadership. And I'm like, hey, that's, ultimately, what do we do this for every week is for all of you that are out there. So again, thank you for joining us. George, thank you for joining us. I didn't expect you to join from a vacay, man. So hopefully everybody's chilling. The family's good.
Yeah, the family, it's Dexter's birthday. So Dexter might come out and join us here in a little bit for his birthday. I told him to come out and might give a shout out on his birthday. So we got a lot of things planned today. We're going to Pineapple Willie's to have a good lunch. And then we're going all you can eat crab legs tonight. So
So, I can't wait to hear next week how many crab legs that Dexter has ate, because that dude can throw down some food, man.
He's on like 13 pieces of bacon already this morning, so he's smashing 13 pieces of bacon, 3 pancakes. But right behind me and then to my left, there's a beautiful ocean of water, and he's been living it up in the water. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, don't worry about what's in the cup this morning. It makes me feel good.
Your morning tea.
My morning tea. You like how I did that too? I even put your little signature.
Oh yeah, I like that. Yeah.
You don't really know that it's not tea, but it might be tequila.
Yeah, tequila starts with T. Well, that's awesome, man. And I'm really excited about the topic today, because when we think about leadership, and we talk about leadership every week, and we talk about culture, that's what we do, right? But when we think about leadership, as we've been traveling and talking to different HR professionals, business owners, just leaders, business leaders in general, the desire to build a healthy, vibrant, engaged culture is across the board, right? Nobody wants to go and work in a culture that's toxic, or that's not supportive, or you don't feel there's a clear sense of direction or purpose, and you're just kind of going through the motions and showing up. The landscape of work has changed. And so the idea around values and vision and mission and what we're all about and what we're in business for beyond profits, and we have to make money, but all of that is a greater, and I would say more amplified conversation. Wouldn't you agree? Like right now with who we're talking to is like, we got to get back to the basics of what makes us human and remember that, because we're leading human beings. We're not leading businesses.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people. At the end of the day, you're dealing with, different types of people as well. And so being able to adapt. And, one of those things that I always say, Ryan, that I think is very important is that as we're we're connecting with these human beings. And you always say, hey, this human organisms, right? Versus an organization.
Yeah.
Is that making sure as we also understanding that who we're working with, right, together, making sure that we're connecting with everybody on their level, not just saying, hey, this is who we are and how we're going to do things, but how we're going to do things is involve, connect, and really have values that touch everyone. Because as we've seen over the last year or two, people really are connecting, Ryan, to organizations that value people more than anything. Value people, value our family, and then value our time. How do you value family and people? You value their time. This is the greatest ROI that we have in life. It's not about money anymore. We can get that, we can gain that back, but the moment we lose it, but time we cannot. And people have understood the value of time more than ever over the last few years, especially since the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And with people being your greatest asset, the investment into that greatest asset, if that really is true, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the idea too, is like values can't be just something that we write on a wall or something that we hope to aspire to one day. Like, we value teamwork, and then you get in the culture and nobody's collaborating. You're like, well,
yeah,
okay, what we say we value and what we actually live are sometimes can be two different things, right? That's why one of the promises we make, what another company would call their values, we call promises, because we say of ourselves, we want to be committed to this,
yeah,
and we're prioritizing this. But one of them is authenticity, where your words and your actions
mhm,
line up. And
yeah,
I think values-based leadership is leadership that is informed by, motivated by, and directed by those values.
yeah,
The vision of the company doesn't change, but the values evolve as we do. Like, back to your
yeah,
point, we're leading an organism, not an organization. So as we evolve, our values evolve, right? The internal ecosystem, the external environment of business, and right? So we as leaders have to be agile and be willing to change with that, but also knowing that the values are something that we're growing as an organization, as an organism, essentially, and we're continuing to grow, and we're continuing to feel and continue to learn, and as we progress as a business, our
yeah,
values should progress with us, right?
right,
I mean, essentially, you don't even need to tell me what your values are. I should just be able to watch your behavior and tell you.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
values are.
yeah. Can you, Ryan, I would love to hear the background or story, if there is one, that you can share, because we talk about core values and a lot of companies have those. As you mentioned, promises. What was the change between having those core values and saying, you know what, although these are technically core values in most organizations, we're going to say these are our promises. What was the change of making those the 5 promises of the Round Room TCC, Verizon TCC?
Yeah. The way that happened is when we started looking at what were the success indicators, what were the motivators, and the direction that the company took within the culture of good that was so impactful for the employees. And so we tapped the employees and brought in a couple organizational psychologists to come in and do interviews and discovery sessions to ask a few questions to find answers around, all right, what was it about the culture of good specifically that had such a profound impact on you as an individual,
No, no.
on your work, on your team, on the organization, for those employees that were working within our company as we were launching the culture of good, those that came to work for us because of the culture of good, because it was a great recruiting tool. People want to work for a vibrant, healthy, supportive culture. So when you're able to actually back up your promotion of that with actually, this is our actions and this is who we are, this is how we operate as a business, what we found was that there were 5 specific indicators that made the culture of good so sticky. It made it where the employees, it resonated with the employees, it motivated them. And I think that's what's really powerful about the promises, is because when Scott and I sat down and started going through the ideas around, what do we call these? They could be called statements. They could have been formed into a mission statement. But these 5 things where we care about each other and the world around us, we drive the business to greater success so we can do more good. We connect with each other. We inspire each other to do good with us. We are authentic in our words and actions. Are is that what we're committed to? Because if that's what we're committed to, they no longer take on the form of values. And I think when we call things values, it it means something different to everybody. Most people think a company values is just a list on the wall that, the people up top hope that everybody adheres to. It's almost like the 10 commandments, right? It's like the values on the wall have become kind of the kindergarten list of rules that the teacher puts on the wall that says, this is how you're supposed to act. No
Yeah.
screaming in the hallways. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like teamwork, everybody works
Walk,
together.
walk on the right side of the road.
Right. So how do the employees know whether those values the organization has committed to those or not? When we called them promises, all of a sudden it shifted the understanding that the culture of good, as it was being motivated and directed by those values, specific those 5 values, which we call promises. When we called them promises as an organization, what we said is, as a company, we're going to live out these values, and we promise to live these out for you as employees, as our team members.
Yeah.
What we're asking you to do then is make these promises to the customers in your community and to each other.
Yeah.
So there's accountability by the organization. And again, I say we're building an organism, not an organization, but you understand, to operationalize this, there had to be a commitment from top tier leaders that would live out the values, because truly what we need in the organization aren't values, we need virtues. And
Ooh.
virtues are values that are embedded throughout every layer of leadership. And I can just watch your life and tell you what your values are. I could watch your organism or the organization of the company and see what the values of that organization is, right?
Yeah.
As a leader, a values-based leader is known for living up to a set of values that then builds trust throughout the entire organization. When you have values-based leadership, you have a leadership culture. And a culture is something that's different than just having a few leaders at the top directing the culture, or saying this is, directing behavior, or giving people the list of 10 commandments. So long answer to that, but that's how we did it. What we did is we said, all right, we're going to make these promises to you. You make the promises to the customers in the community. And as we live up to our values, you live up to the values within your community and within your team. And when we see that there's values alignment between employees and the company that they work for, or leadership and the values of the business, then what we have is there's a greater sense of congruency between everybody, right? There's a harmony. Have you ever been to how Dexter's turning 9 today?
9 years old.
9 years old. Is he in band at all?
No, nope, not at all.
Yeah. Well, if he ever decides to go into band, don't expect much for the first few years of school bands, man. I mean, there's no harmony at all. It's painful. You're there supporting your kid, and you're like, yay, they play their few notes on the flute, and hopefully it kind of translates to everything else. But you're just starting to learn how to play these instruments. And I think over time, what we're looking for is we're, as a team, as a congruent, working together, a movement of people that function with the same mission, the same understanding, the same values. And what that allows for is that harmony, right? It allows for there to be a lack of, when we think about the term dissonance, we think about a band, a bunch of nine-year-olds playing music together. It's not going to sound perfect.
Yeah.
It's going to be messy, right? But over time, if they keep playing together, the idea is if you have a good band director, they're gonna help to create more harmony.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I think that's what we're doing. Where we don't see harmony, we want to begin to hear that harmony, right? Are people speaking the same language? Do they know the values? It's always funny when we go into leadership development trainings and ask people to state their values of the company, and nobody knows the values, man. It's like
They definitely,
2023. It's
yeah,
like, what are they there for?
yeah,
They just don't matter. And if they matter, then they have to be lived out.
yeah. Lived out and applied, right? When you live something out, you're applying it to your daily. I mean, it's part of the hiring. It's part of every decision that you make within the organization should align with your values, right? So if you're saying you're trustworthy, how are you showing that you're trustworthy with your employees, your clients, with each other? And then how are you living that out individually is what you're saying. Like, it's a day-to-day. It's not just something we do or we quote on a weekly basis. It's something that we should and could recognize in your organization at
Yeah,
that
I
point.
mean, it informs everything. Like, what are we here
Yeah.
for? You
Yep.
know, I didn't look this up, but maybe we'll look it up this week, or maybe somebody can Google it real quick. Some of our friends that are out there, all you people that love to do research. um, I think it's really important to hold on a second. My computer is about to die here. That would have been really messed up. I looked down and I saw a battery about to die. You would have
Oh,
been rolling solo for a second, homie.
hey.
Sorry, my ADHD just kicked in. What were we talking about? Values?
you dropped down and was like, oh shoot, here we go again, another vacation. At least it wasn't me ending the call this time. It would have been you and the battery there. So we would have went on and
Yeah,
on.
I happened to look down and my brain went to, I want to make sure that we're live out there. But if anybody's out there listening in and can do some research, I'm interested if there's a way to find where this idea of company values came from.
Yeah.
Right. Because when we talk about it today, it still does not give motivation and direction to companies. It's almost like the majority of companies that I interact with and leaders that I interact with, the values don't mean anything. I mean, it's just kind of like some ancillary idea around, yeah, the culture includes our values. What are your values? Blah, blah, blah. But in terms of what you're talking about, the day-to-day, values-based leadership looks at whatever we're leading as leaders, whoever we're leading as leaders, and recognizing that culture impacts everything and everyone. I would say that your values are not only the language or the voice of your culture. I would say your values are the observable behaviors of your organization. So that of your company. So that's where it gets tricky, because if your values are your observable behaviors, then they are your virtues. They're what you're known for. They're values that are so embedded within every decision, within meetings and huddles, within how we treat each other, how we interact with our customers, how we make decisions for the future, how we chart the course toward the vision that we have. When I think about vision and values, I'm thinking about us on, like, if we were on a large boat, a large ship, and we were charting our course. I see the vision very much of this is where we're headed, right? So this is our somewhat of our destination. That's the vision. This is where we're moving toward. The values are how we get there. So the values are the rudder, right? The values also become the wind in our sails. And so, but if our values aren't informing our decision making, and they're not a part of our day to day, and they don't influence and impact who we are, both personally and professionally, then we have that lack of harmony. And I think the frustration a lot of people have isn't necessarily that maybe the company doesn't have values. It's that there's a misalignment between my personal values and what my professional values need to be, because they're different, right? Or the company doesn't prioritize those values. And so I'm kind of curious for those that are out there, how did company values actually begin? If anybody can do some research and send that in to us, it's just interesting. Like, was it like 40 years ago? You know, like when somebody was like, you know what we need in the midst of all of this are values. You know, like what was that motivator or that spark that made someone say, you know what companies need and businesses need? They need a set of values. I'm not so sure I know the reasoning behind the beginning of it. I can say now, as we're further along in this process, I would say by now in 2023, you would imagine that values have become more than just simply what the leadership hopes people start behaving like. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got to get back to like doing what we say and being who we say we are. Because when there's a disconnect between our behavior and what we say we are and what we say we value and who we claim to be, right? There's no way to talk about trust. There's no way to talk about integrity or leadership when you don't have that type of values-based leadership. I don't know that there is any other type of leadership, right?
Yeah.
Which gets me onto a topic too, leadership styles. Values-based
Oh man.
leadership, I'm just going to say this, is not a leadership style.
Yeah.
And we need to stop calling things leadership styles
Yeah.
because some things are just toxic. I've heard some leaders described as being very very more, they're a more tough kind of leader. They're more harsh.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just an asshole. It's not maybe a leadership style. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if it's not
It's a
healthy,
justification.
yeah,
It's the justification of their weaknesses and how
right.
they hide their own insecurities. And then sometimes I'll say this, sometimes the asshole leadership is really because they receive that and they assume that's what gets through to people. You'll see a lot of that, especially in sales, where
Yeah.
you'll see an asshole come out and try to say, hey, this is just how we drive the business.
Yeah.
And all I'm thinking is that you're just driving me away. Like, I
Well,
don't want
and
to
it
lead
works.
people in such a way. Well, you think about this. Do you want your customers or your clients to see you lead that way? And would that bring more customers and clients? Right?
Yeah.
Because what's behind closed doors does not always stay behind closed doors, especially in this day, right? This topic, right? That whole this will get me fired up on a rant like never before because I strongly
Keep going.
despise those who call themselves leaders who are all they really are is fake bullies that are abusive in power.
Yeah.
They have power and authority. They're not leaders, right? Leadership is not a title. It's not because you're the CEO or the COO that you have leadership. Leadership is something that's going to help develop, grow, inspire, empower, right? People that gives that positivity. And leadership is empathetic. Leadership is love, grace, and trust. Leadership is not some asshole who's going to try to force you to do something his or her way and use verbal language or physical. If it gets physical, you mess with the wrong one over here, though.
No, you know about that, homie.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know about
yeah.
that.
I'll
And
take care of that myself. But
yeah.
like you cannot hide behind this because leadership is not a title. You
Yeah.
can't hide behind a leadership title and say this is who I am and how I do things when you're dealing with people because you're going to mess with the wrong one and say the wrong thing to the wrong person and you're
Yeah.
going to get their leadership style and how they lead.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Their
leave my, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
leave my hands to touch you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Your
I
verbal
mean,
abuse
yeah.
is going to turn to physical.
Yeah, I mean that idea of leading through intimidation, man, or
Yeah.
like through fear. And the reality is you can't do that because the very terminology of leadership starts with the word lead. And in order to lead, you have to be out front setting an example or with people setting the example. A lead is someone who is out front. They set the pace, right? If you're the lead in a play, then you have a primary role to keep the rest of the characters in that play a part of the skit, right? If you're a lead
Yeah.
in a race, you're out front setting the pace and people are following your example. If you are a leader and you come into work and you have a pissy attitude all the time and you yourself don't get along with people, and you're the type of person that says, well, I'm a leader but I'm not a people person, I would challenge that. I don't think there are such things. I don't think any leader on earth is able to not be a people person, because the question would always be, then what are you leading? One of my first mentors, I think I mentioned this the other day, was told me that leadership would be great if it wasn't for the people. And I'm like, well, and I remember I was 16 at the time, 17. And I remember telling him, I'm like, but leadership wouldn't exist without people. Like what and who are you leading? What is
Right.
there? Right. So it's really interesting to me, because outside of values-based leadership, servant leadership, transformative leadership, outside of relational leadership, there are no leaders. Leaders are servants. Leaders do go out of their way to support people. They're not perfect. They don't hit the mark all the time. Listen, there are we have attitudes. We come in disgruntled at times. I'm not always hitting the mark. You know that, George. We hang out all the time, dude. Like, I'm a vulnerable, real person, but that's what you're going to get, and that's what I value too. I value vulnerability, realness, but I'm also not going to be an asshole just because I'm real. I think there's that reality now that's like, we talk about bringing your soul to work and we talk about bringing your full self, and people are like, well, if I brought my full self to work, everybody wouldn't like me. And I'm like, well, maybe you need to help your full self and heal a little bit. Like, as leaders, we have to first self lead, and we have
Right.
to be open to grow and
Yeah.
recognize that we have not arrived. But to your point, I don't see leaderships as a style. And your clothes are a style, but you don't put leadership on and off like you're like a cool jacket. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
your leadership is who you are, not what you have. Authority, titles, position is what you have. Leadership is who you are.
That's so true. I wanna get a little bit more into, as we're talking about this leadership. I want to get into some of those strategies and challenges. But I heard through the grapevine that you said something about you got some craziest shit in HR for today. Is that true?
Yeah, I do. But first, I want to try something new on Champion Your Culture, the podcast. I don't have an intro for this, but this is going to be how will George react? So we travel a
Oh
lot.
boy.
We travel a lot, man. We're on
Yeah.
planes a lot. You're in Florida right now. I have a question, man. If you were to get on a plane and you were sitting there in the aisle and you looked up and you saw what I'm about to show you, I want to know how you would respond. All right. You ready for it?
All right. Give it
Okay,
to me.
here we go. All right.
Oh my goodness.
You gotta help me out, bro. You look up
Oh,
from your seat, and that back of that dude's head
oh
is
yeah.
looking back at you, man.
You know what's funny though is that I think I'd be more freaked out if he had a hat on and I went to take a nap and I woke up and I saw that. Like, I'll freak out. Like, what? But yeah, that's
Uh,
the best part though is that he still kept the stash. Like, there ain't
oh,
like
that's a serious
he got
stash. It goes clear off
and the
the side of
eyebrows
his head.
and the eyebrows. I wish there was people. There's been people walking by here and there. I wish there was people to come around to
I have no
uh,
idea, man.
see this,
All right,
because
yeah,
that's
that's rough.
different.
Yeah, that's way different. That's way different. All right, now I'm gonna do some
Come on, man.
crazy shit in HR, because we have a lot of HR people that work with teams all the time. This is some crazy shit in HR, brought to you by Culture of Good. All right, we just read it. We don't write it. So I apologize for what I'm about to read. This is off of Reddit, and if you're on Reddit, there's all kinds of subreddits, and there's just some crazy stuff on there. And under human resources, so Reddit has subreddits, which are like groups that you can just jump into and learn about. And I'm on several of them. Anti-work, recruiting nightmare is a good one. This one is human resources, and this was written by I've got two of them for you. Roman Dolce wrote, I was once interviewing some applicants, and my legal assistant, all right, wanted to sit in on some interviews so that she could get some experience in. She asked the applicant straight up, what kind of Asian are you? I never allowed her to sit on interviews again. Legal assistant, go to law school. She failed the bar exam twice.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh shit. That's not good.
That's not good at all. No. Certain people should not be in the interview process. All right, one more. This is by Asterism Raptor. Same subreddit, human resources. You HR people share a lot on Reddit. I think my scariest encounter was with a man we suspended for sexual harassment. We had a large turnstile in the front entrance of the building so no one can enter that wasn't allowed. Well, he came in and was walking back and forth along the turnstiles asking to see HR. I came out not really worried about anything because I felt protected at first. I asked him how I could help him, and he wanted to talk about how he didn't do anything and he wants his job and he'd never sexually harass anyone. I calmly informed him the investigation wasn't completed and we would reach out to him as soon as we had a final verdict on the situation. He then looked at my chest. I have a large tattoo on my chest up to my neck and said, that's a lovely tattoo on your chesticles. I was taken aback, and I then noticed he had a gun in his pocket. As he moved his hand out of his pocket, I immediately told him to have a nice day, and we would call him, turned on my heel, and walked faster than any power walking grandma you've ever seen back to my security guard post. I informed them and refused to go up front. Police were called and everything. We found out later on not only had he murdered someone 15 years ago, he was also wanted at that moment for armed burglary. Don't meet anyone alone. So there you go.
Oh my goodness. I'm looking forward to here in the next month or so. We're gonna have a good friend of mine's on Ben, not Ben Eubanks, but Ben. He has a technology company called Fama, F-A-M-A.
Oh yeah.
And this is an exact scenario of things that his company saves. So those people that's in the HR that makes business decisions, one of the best background checks is out there. One of the companies that I truly love and become fond of, the team out there, McCole. So shout out to McCole and Ben. But Fama Technologies, Ben had not necessarily as crazy of an experience of why he started, but he's seen companies like this. Just recently, his company software helped them prevent a mass shooting at a large organization. So,
oh wow,
yeah, that's crazy. You'd never know the type of person because people falsify their background checks, their resumes and things of that nature
all the time.
But for that guy to be dealing with that charge, and then it's like stealing a jersey. I literally just saw a video. One of the kids showed me a video of a guy that stole a Miami Dolphins jersey. He shows up to court.
Why would you steal a Dolphins jersey? Number one. Okay, keep going.
But he shows up to court in a Miami Dolphins jersey after he stole it. Yeah, it was the same number too. Yeah.
Oh
so I don't know if that's craziest shit things are. It may be the dumbest people.
Yeah, that's yeah. For sure. It's like wah, wah.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
So yeah, that is some craziest
that's some crazy shit. Yeah. Pretty wild.
Yeah.
But I think what takes the cake is a dude with the face on the back of his head, man.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot. That's a commitment too. And you have to remember that was somebody's baby at one point. There was a mom that looked down at that little boy and said, oh, I have so many dreams and aspirations, and I love you so much. You're so cute. And that's what that person turned into, man.
turn into.
That's
You know, the
somebody's
beautiful,
employee. That could be somebody's boss.
yeah, that could be. I was gonna say he could be somebody's boss. Like he don't care. He's running the ship. You know, so it doesn't matter for him.
I
The
guess.
the thing that I would ask him or want to know is that does his face show his moods? Like when he's really excited, does the eyebrows move? You know, does he
Yeah.
smile or frown? Like does he have
Yeah.
like a head moment thing where he can kind of do some of that funny stuff?
I think what's
That's
amazing is he still had a double chin. So I think he wins.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that is
crazy,
great.
crazy, crazy. So recently on this topic of values, right in the middle of the pandemic, Gallup did a study around whether employees believe we talk about this when we get on stage every time, right? How many
Yeah,
employees believe in their company values? It's 27%. When we think about engagement scores, we find that engagement scores are very close to that. I wonder if there's any type of correlation between people not believing in the company values and obviously not being engaged at work.
yeah,
Because the engagement scores at work don't seem to be changing much or getting any better. So we're still right around the 30 to 37% that are not engaged.
yeah,
Not necessarily disengaged. Disengaged are those that are looking for other work. And I think a lot of people are doing that more so now post pandemic. Finding like Indeed was, I forget what the stat was. I'd have to look it up, but I think it's something like if you we talked about it last week on the podcast. By the way, if you didn't listen to it last week, having Alex on, that was great, wasn't it?
yeah. It was.
That was
Shout
really
out to
great.
Alex.
Yeah.
One of our highest downloads for the week over
Yeah.
week. So that
Yeah,
was
that's awesome.
really
That's
awesome.
awesome.
But,
But talking about that and having her on and talking about the importance of employees knowing the values and then also being able to believe in those values. I think, a lot of what we learned from Alex last week was, there's a disconnect between what we say we are as a culture. And when people start working for us, they realize that, oh, it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. We kind of fluff it up a little bit to get people to work for us. And then they realize there's not a whole lot of fluff. And I think it's really important to be real about these are our values. But don't you agree? There's got to be, if there's a belief gap, there's going to be a behavior gap because behavior comes from belief from feeling. If people don't feel connected and engaged, a good way to identify what where that's coming from is how embedded are the values. The more we embed the values and the more they inform what motivates and gives us direction, the higher our scores of engagement are going to be. So when we launched the culture of good, we quickly had to identify what is the language behind this culture, so everyone can start speaking the same language. That's why it's important for people to memorize the values, not so that we can just answer a question during a workshop. Do you know the values? And we can say them. But we need to be using them every single day in a way that it gives us that form of direction in that same sense that we set the course with the vision, but how we get there is the values. We live up to our values and we make these promises to each other and to the world and we live up to them. And in doing so, engagement increases. One of the benefits to having values based leadership is that very thing that people are more engaged, more productive, happier. I was just on a panel last night with Business Furniture and Company here in Indianapolis or in the area of Indianapolis, and great company. Shout out to Mary there for having us on. That's a lot of the conversation, of those that were on the panel, including myself, was around this very topic. It was actually brought up the reality that all of us at the end of the day kept bringing up values, 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 and it's interesting because where do we see companies actually operationalizing those and how are we seeing that lived up to? Don't you agree that engagement and knowing and being motivated and directed by the values have a direct correlation?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. There's definitely a connection there in all aspects.
Yeah. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. You're breaking up a little bit. So when we think about what to do about this, how do we start to calibrate or recalibrate the organization? Because we talked about it earlier, that as the company and as our business evolves, the values of the business evolve as well. Individuals throughout the company evolve. We're evolving as an organism, right? We're growing. We have instances that we talk to companies where there's a merger. I know we're talking to a business right now, George. We just had lunch with them the other day. There's going to be an acquisition and a merging of two entities, and each entity has its own culture. There's microcultures, right, within teams. How do we let's talk a little bit as we kind of end the show here today. How do we start to look at the dynamic of where we are as a company, as a business, what the values currently state that are stated, and then how do we begin to encourage people? Sorry, I just dropped off for a second. Are you still there? You're on mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
you paused for a second,
That
but I
whole
can
time.
still hear you.
Okay. So, how do we start to calibrate the organization to the values? And then how do we want to calibrate the organization or our business to the current values? And then the idea is, how do we then begin to spark dialogue around what needs to change? Like, are these still our values or not? Because as we've been talking about, values evolve as we do.
Right, right.
What are some ideas you have around that?
I think, as you stated, one of the things that we've done in the organization, I'll just speak from my experience, and talk about the transition of values. When we first started, the values were basically our values as leaders. This is what we wanted our company to be about. And I think one of the things that we learned is about 2 years in, as we were growing and scaling, right, we were wanting to take this next leap from going from a mom and pop, 1 or 2 doors, 3 or 4 doors, to, man, this is really something that's going to grow to 10, 15, 20 doors. And when you get to that level, you're talking a few hundred employees. How does that really impact? And we realized that although our foundation and the values that we wanted to uphold were still true and they remain, as we
Yeah.
brought in more people and new people, right? The culture changed, and also some of those values change with it,
Yeah.
because other people's perspectives to us matter, right? And so we wanted to make sure that our values aligned with who we are, and then also where we were wanting to go as an organization, and the people that now were a part of that team. Now the mission never changed. The message changed a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Our mission
Yeah.
was still to grow,
Yeah.
scale, and dominate the area. The mission didn't change, but
Yeah.
the how we do it, those things did. And so from a strategy standpoint, and even some of those challenges, because we wanted our values to be deeply embedded into the outcomes, and the direction that we were going as an organization, Ryan. And I think some of the important parts of that was, how do we as leaders practice this, and how
Mhm.
does this align with everything? As we said earlier, as you were talking about the 5 promises and the transition from core values to 5 promises, I think one of the things that we went to, because at that time we didn't have HR, man, we didn't have some of that stuff. We didn't know any better at the same time. But as we
Yeah.
were getting online and we brought in HR and we made this dramatic change, the values then turned to, how do our values impact our policies,
Yeah.
right? How do
Yeah.
they align with the things that we practice within our organizations? Because each location is different because the leadership is different, right?
Yeah.
Leadership is not, this is what we want you to do as a leader, robot. It was, how do you show compassion, grace,
Yeah.
and build trust within your team, then to lead, develop, and impact and move. Like it was always about growing and scaling. And so those values became a part of that. And what we did to determine what our values were, and it's basic strategies that we use in our leadership development, or even with organization when we're doing value basis workshops with organization, is having everybody share what they believe we are as a company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then we say, what do we do? What does our clients say? What does our customers say? What are you hearing? Right?
Yeah.
We bring in our reviews, the good, bad, and the uglies,
Yeah.
because those matter. We've done something or said something or provided something in that way. And so really navigating that potential of who we are now and where we want to be, and aligning that with who we are as individuals, is kind of how we built and then begin to state our values, and we simplify it
Yeah.
in such a way that we don't, we talked a couple of weeks ago, we saw an organization had 20 core values, and I think nobody knows 10%, right? Nobody can say more than two. When you got 20, it's overthinking.
Yeah.
But really, and actually having organizational practices. When I
Yeah.
say practices, I think about when I joined the team and I showed up around the room at the headquarters there. Yes, the 5 promises are on the wall, but how are we practicing the 5 promises? How are we practicing, that we care for one another? As you said earlier, being authentic, right? How are we practicing driving the business? How are we practicing these daily outcomes in everything that we do? Because it should impact every step of the way in every process that we have, Ryan.
Well, and I think, if to your point, as a additional step with all of that is how are we recognizing and rewarding the behavior that aligns with those values? I think one thing that embeds values are number one, leadership living them, right? When we think about embedding, every time I use the word embed, I think of like a thread on a needle that just goes into fabric and it just starts, it's weaving its way into the fabric.
Yeah.
And it's holding the fabric together. My wife Katara has a really beautiful quilt that her grandma Mary made. And she has it, and we take it everywhere we go. We use it for picnics and everything else. But when you look at the intricacies of all the patchwork and how she was meticulously put that thread in to hold all of it together. When we think about values-based leadership, I think about embedding the values into everything, like you're talking about, into policies, how it informs how we meet in our gatherings, recognizing and rewarding the kind of behavior that we want to see. If somebody's living up to one of the values of, driving the business because they, went out of their way for a fellow employee, like we need to recognize that, like whatever we recognize and reward, we prioritize and we embed. Every time we recognize and reward what we see in the values, it's like taking that thread and that needle and like, getting right into the fabric of the business, right into the very base, all the way through the organization, like every layer of leadership, and that builds that culture of leadership where people are saying the same thing, they're recognizing the same behavior, they're looking for reasons to celebrate one another and to give recognition and rewarding the kind of things that we want to see. If we see something positive, there's so many times that we're quick to point out a negative and be critical of the organization or the company that we work for, the people that we work around. But I think we need to be just as intentional to be positive about the environment and to look for reasons to celebrate one another, because as we do, it continues to build and it perpetuates a different kind of environment where people aren't walking around complaining and grumbling and, criticizing everything, but people come in with a different perspective. And that values-based leadership requires a lot of self-awareness as a leader, and understanding that what are my values and what are the values of my organization, and how am I living up to them, and how am I setting that example so that others can follow my lead, not follow my authority.
Yeah, I think that's important, Ryan. As you said that, I'm thinking um, that when you follow somebody's lead versus authority, it goes back to those leadership style of people
Yeah.
uh, where you don't want to receive what you're given, right? And most people that are given that abusive power, very bullyish power, typically don't want to receive that back when it comes to how they do things. When I think about that, I also think, how do we apply these things within
Yeah.
the workplaces and really ensure that they are lived out and practiced in every way. I think about the whole, and it's something that I think you do really well. And you mentioned it earlier. You're very authentic and very vulnerable. And by the way, we're going to get real excited right now because the bar just opened up, and I just so
Oh
happen
yeah.
to set a podcast by the bar.
Just so happened.
Just so happened. But I think about these things when I think about the leadership that I've caught onto, like I really just kind of I want to be a part
Yeah.
and really gain some things from that person. Those people always led by example, right?
Yeah.
They possess this sacred responsibility. I felt like responsibility to great leaders understand the sacredness of responsibility that you have to embody the values of your company.
Yeah.
I feel like they foster that meaningful communication. It isn't perfect communication, but they foster a communication where they know how to speak to people and individuals in particular. They possess that, that what I said earlier, the processes and practices, how it's part of the organization's DNA. And as you're talking about that, it's interwoven and into the processes and the practices and the policies, from performance evaluations and recognition to the hiring, decision making, the frameworks, right? Everything. And then I think about those leaders who ignite the spirit of recognition, that celebrate those who are working hard, celebrate those. We talked about it, several months ago, about even celebrating those failures, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily saying, hey, keep on making failures, but hey, I want to celebrate you for taking a risk and trying to do what you felt was best for the company. How can I help you, support you? What do I need to do to help provide more for you?
Yeah.
And having it continue, because it then turns into that continuous learning and development of that person, to where you can keep that alive.
Yeah. It's great, man. Yeah. It's and it requires that. And I think, to your point, when there is situations in business where we're not succeeding in terms of seeing the kind of outcomes that we want, very much back to being on that large ship in the middle of the ocean. We've set
Yeah.
course, we have a vision, mission, we know where we're headed. The values become that rudder that give us direction along the way. So if we start to get off course, right, if the business starts to be impacted maybe in a negative way, then there's two Georges. What we end up with is getting off course, and the values will tell us that, right? If we don't have values, we don't know whether we're still on course or not. Like, just because you set a pinpoint and a destination, what's your compass, right? What's the compass along the way? What's that internal compass on the inside of you? And I kind of want to end with this. We talk about bringing your soul to work. We've used a lot of metaphors in terms of how values are looked at, but I think at the very essence of what values are, they're the language of our soul.
Yeah.
And when our soul speaks, when we hear our soul speak, it's going to speak the language of our values. And when
Yes.
we're not living up to those values, that's where we have internal conflict, because our internal compass is broken. And it doesn't allow us to stay connected to who we are. and we start focusing on what we own, or how much authority we have, or what position we have gained in life, because internally we've lost our way. And so coming back to oneself and an understanding of what are my personal values, how am I living up to those? um, Listen, if you're out there and you want to know what your values are, let's jump on a call together. We could do some
Yeah.
coaching. We could do one session. We could do a few sessions of coaching and help you identify what your values are. You could always bring George and I in to do a workshop with your team. We'll tap your team, your executive team, leadership, talk to those, throughout every layer of leadership, and help you do an audit on your values and identify where are we now, and do these values still resonate with who we are, and what we say we are as a business and as a company. And so, yeah, we would love the opportunity for you to reach out to us. And I know sometimes you jump on this show and you think, yeah, George and Ryan are untouchable. But listen, George is wearing a Rugrat shirt, and I've got like, we're just, yeah, like, reach out to us. We're down for this. This is less about becoming more corporate, and this is becoming more human. And we
Yeah.
want to help you help others. And part of that is in championing you. George, we have January 23rd and 24th. Just going to throw those dates out there as a save the date. If you've been looking at joining Culture of Good and our team, and building this movement in your community, maybe in your business, you don't have to come on behalf of your company, but if your company can send you, that's great. It's a 2-day intensive, immersive learning, training, and development. It's happening on January 23rd and 24th with Culture of Good. It's what we call our Culture Champion certification. And the reason I bring it up is that's what we do. We champion champions. As you champion your culture and your people, we want to champion you. So make sure you write down those dates on January 23rd and 24th. If you want more information about that, or you want to go ahead and register for it, you can do so on cultureofgood.com. So go on cultureofgood.com. It's on the front page. Click on the save my spot, and you'll have the opportunity to reserve your seat there for that 2-day development. George, that's going to be pretty powerful. So hopefully some of our people that are out there listening will join us for that.
Yeah, and I just want to end with this, Ryan, as we wrap up the podcast. In the sympathy of leadership. We talk about that harmony of leadership when values resonate at the core. As you said, harmony really emerges, guiding souls towards that purposeful, meaningful, transformational dance. Right? When I'm thinking, I got this music in my head now that really touches the heart of your people, that elevates their minds and really ignites that passion, because they understand what they do, but then it becomes a creation of why they do what they do. It ignites a legacy of greatness, man, like no other. So I want to encourage and challenge people today to really embrace value-based leadership and really illuminate that path to creating the outcome that you want, which is, healthy and meaningful workplace culture where your employees feel a sense of genuine, you care, you're there for more than just the check and work that you do, that there's growth and development for your personal life as well. Just how organizations that we work with and even what we are part of function, the outcomes are so beautiful when you really embrace what it means to have this value-based leadership within your organization. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And those organizations, those companies that are the most successful that we've seen, every team member is a values-based leader.
yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
that's that leadership culture. So again, thank
Yep.
you all for jumping on with us on Culture of Good. George, it's good to see you from the cloudy state of Florida.
Yeah, let's see if I can, with all these wires hanging around, see if I can pan it around. There are some dolphins.
Hey, we get to see the beach. Yes, show us the beach. Some of us are in the office right now. If you're listening with us, we're seeing a view of the beach there in Florida. Oh man, it looks great. Wish I was there with you, man. I would have a tequila in hand, my friend.
That's the best part. People are already lining up.
Good. Pass out some business. Get some business going, brother. All right, man. Well, we'll see you guys all next week on Champion Your Culture. Hi, friends. Thanks for joining us on Champion Your Culture podcast today.
We're so excited that you're here and want to invite you to connect with us. You can watch the show weekly on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn, and listen anywhere you get podcasts.
Subscribe today to get new relevant content each week on how to champion yourself and your team. Thanks again for listening to Champion Your Culture.